Industrial Revolution, Land, Labor, and Government Actions, Section 4.2. During and after the Civil War, the United States entered a period of rapid economic growth that was due in part of government policies that contributed to changes in factors in production of the United States. Factors that contributed to economic growth are land, labor, capital, technology, and entrepreneurship. History of industrial growth. Economic growth started in the first half of the 19th century. The role of government. The role of government during the Industrial Revolution was to keep peace or fight wars. Government action prior to Civil War. National Bank. The National Bank's role was to start and formulate as a result of the capital. The banks that were formed usually didn't invest in the factories and industries, though there were a few shorter loans to industrialists that they could cover operating expenses.
Native Americans during the time lost a lot of land because of technology and rapid growth, which took over and the people started to build railroad tracks and more factories. Court decisions. The court's decision passed patent laws that protected the right of the inventor. Interstate commerce. Interstate commerce basically would use the rules and regulations of the Act to assure fair interactions between the various transportation carriers and the public. Technology changes. They had many technological changes during the Industrial Revolution, including the steam power, the use of iron and steel, and the development of coal industry.
Republican policies before and after the Civil War. Expansion west. It was the Louisiana Purchase that doubled the size of the United States and had stories of beautiful land and stories of wealth. War contracts. The Black Codes often required persons of color to sign a year-long labor contract, with wages payable at the end of the year, and punish vagrants found in public and mandatory labor. Newly freed slaves were often prohibited from working in many occupations and from acquiring land, but even when not forced by law, they were forced to sign such contracts. Many African Americans with limited options signed such contracts voluntarily. Despite their unfair terms and limited rights, Southern courts enforced these contracts. It was, in truth, extremely difficult for African Americans to challenge their terms, since the codes also limited access to the courts by former slaves. Native American and labor policies. These were codes called Black Codes for slaves and Native Americans that put policies on their rights, which they barely had, and gave them more brutal punishments. Tariffs. Tariffs were a leading cause to the Civil War and caused reforms and acts to repeal the high taxes.
Immigration. Immigration policies were established which documented who traveled into the U.S. in the late 19th century for the first time in history. Anti-union. These actions supported the interests of big businesses rather than workers whose wages were depressed by the supply of unskilled immigrant workers and whose organization into labor unions was undermined by government actions. Although high tariffs protected the jobs of workers, protective tariffs did not support the interests of consumers because prices of goods were kept artificially high. Consumers. The late 19th century was a time when business leaders used a variety of tactics in their efforts to establish monopolies in many key industries. The railroads were prominent among these concentrated industries. Fear of businesses colluding caused the federal government to enact laws and develop regulations to stop businesses from doing so. But relatively few businesses were ever broken up by actions of the government.
Growth. Surplus. Led to industrial growth, which in turn led to a surplus of products that could not be purchased by American consumers and become available for export. These surpluses helped grow the United States government to support the expansion of internal markets through the foreign policy initiatives that expanded the United States' territorial influence, protected American investments abroad, and promoted trade.